Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. We have a guest host, obviously. Amanda Rosemark is joining us. Mark is otherwise, what do they say? Otherwise indisposed or engaged, or he's got something going on.
He's an important man doing important things.
Important things. He's got really big, oh my gosh. So I just watched Family Guy last night, and Roger had really big things going on. He was the decider, and apparently Mark's got really big things going on.
You know the segment's going to be good when
we start with Family Guy. Well, there's that, and of course there was the commute to work this morning. So if you're in the Twin Cities area, you were either pleasantly or unpleasantly
greeted by winter.
Exactly, greeted by the snow. I can actually look over, and it looks like the snowmaking machines are blowing out on Highland.
That's okay. The skiers will be happy.
Yeah, oh, totally. Although the traffic, the people driving. Wow. Let me just say, wow. You'd think that, per our conversation, we were talking about it prior to the show starting. You'd never guess that we all live in Minnesota and we've all driven in this weather before. You'd never know.
Got to relearn it.
That's right. So, anyway, there was some good topics today. I think we've got some interesting. There's been a movement I've been noticing in a lot of our blog posts. They're actually turning into a series of. Almost not, just a short series of how to do something, right?
Yep.
So you've got journeys, right? Migrating things.
Yeah, it's not just announcements. It's sort of an educational tool.
Yeah,
Sure.
which is cool. Sometimes though it can be a challenge, obviously, for us when we're presenting multi-part series topics. It's hard to engage in the conversation, or it's difficult to go deep on it. So. There was a couple cool things in there. There's some new ways to satisfy some requirements for de-identifying data. And there's certainly there was an interesting post that I wanted to share with people. I always find the posts where they walk through the method of the madness of how they identify, how they perform forensics on, for example, like a security thing. So, and I don't know why, maybe it's just me, but.
No, I find it super interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting how they go about basically getting to doing a root cause analysis or doing a discovery on a breach or how to identify a certain type of breach or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's nice to know what they're doing so we don't have to worry about it.
Absolutely. So the first thing this morning to talk about is we've got tips and tricks for migrating on-premises Hadoop infrastructure to Azure HD Insight. For those of you who are new to the cloud or have got existing infrastructure that you've built up over time, we sympathize with you. We know that you're probably running on hardware that's not latest and greatest. You probably spent a lot of money to create a high watermark, especially if you're doing clusters with Hadoop.
But probably still running out of capacity.
And it's probably still running, absolutely. And, oh, by the way, you're probably still doing a lot of jobs in serial because you can't parallelize your workloads. So there is a tips and tricks series. Basically, what they're doing is they're introducing a series to introduce how to bring your on-premises infrastructure. So you can see in this particular diagram, you've got things like Hive and Kafka and Spark and HBase, all the standard stuff you would expect to see in a traditional Hadoop ecosystem. Right. How you're taking this stuff, this on-premises capability, and bringing it up into Azure Insight. Not a lot of people know, or HD Insight. Not a lot of people know that HD Insight, while it is PaaS, gives you it is flexible enough for you to incorporate not just the base Hadoop stuff that's provided by Hortonworks, who we partnered with for HD Insight, but you can bring other technologies to bear in that PaaS offering. And sometimes it's as simple as uploading a jar file or a tar file or whatever it is. But for the most part, it's pretty flexible in terms of they basically lay down the base plumbing, if you will. And you can actually extend that with stuff that you're using on premises or stuff that you'd like to introduce into that ecosystem above and beyond.
Yeah. Well, and the nice thing is once you have it in the cloud, it connects so much easier to other tools that you might have running.
Absolutely.
So if you have a web front end for some of the data you're processing.
Yep, definitely. Well, and the cool thing about it too is as you're introducing these clusters into the cloud ecosystem, as you're bringing your stuff from on-premises, it's operationalized. So it's an operational cost, right? So you're basically paying for what you use when you use it, and that's the only time you're paying for it.
Right.
In some cases, we've seen customers see tens of thousands of dollars per month reduction in cost because they're not running this giant or trying to provision this giant cluster for 24/7, 365. Right? It's provisioned. Your queries are run, your aggregates, your summaries, all your number crunching happens. It basically persists that information and then it goes away.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
yeah, so I think
so this series really takes you through kind of everything from the benefits of moving to the cloud, the motivation, why you might consider it, some of the things you mentioned here,
right. Why do
all
it?
the way through like, okay, so what are the infrastructure best practices? We know what we're doing on-prem, but how can we translate that into the cloud? And then into like security and even DevOps. How can you hook it into your DevOps tooling and your processes to make sure that the way that you're doing things effectively on premises, you now can do that in the cloud as well, or even improve on those processes.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that we're showing, yes, there is a place for DevOps in this space. A lot of people only associate DevOps with traditional development.
Yeah.
No.
No.
It really can be, it can be leveraged really in every facet of what your organization does in the IT/ developer ecosystem.
Yeah, we've actually been doing a lot of talking around DevOps for data lately, just
very
because
cool.
It's becoming such an important element because there's so much data and there's so many notebooks and algorithms and things that people are building out. We need a better way to track that across all data scientists and all people that are contributing.
Oh, and that's a great point. Like your Jupyter, what is it, Jupyter notebooks? Yeah. How do you keep track of those? How do you best collaborate on those? Work together, version them, right? Do all the things that you would hope to see. And version isn't necessarily the best word, but control, I guess, or be able to roll back, play back, that kind of stuff.
Well, and even know who's accessing it, how are they contributing to it, what are they adding? Because in the past, you maybe had one data scientist that was writing these notebooks and they could keep track of it and they knew what was going on. But now you have a whole team.
Absolutely. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so highly recommended, especially if you've got a traditional on-premises Hadoop infrastructure and you're looking at, okay, now is the time. You might be running up against, you've got a 5-year depreciation schedule, or you've got something going on, maybe
whatever it might be.
Yep, absolutely. So very cool. Another series is the smart way to a smarter city, right? So a lot of conversations are happening with customers in the IoT space. I mean, it's kind of
it's huge.
And IoT is all encompassing. I think we've come as a community, as a technology community, we've maybe kind of overused the term a little bit, but it really does encompass all things, the Internet of Things, hence the name, right?
Right.
So in the context of this series, they're talking more about a smarter city, right? And a smarter city isn't just about smart buildings. It's about collecting and aggregating, but connecting everything together, right?
Yeah, everything from traffic lights to parking meters to whatever, parking garages.
Right,
You have all of this infrastructure that you want to connect and control and be smarter with how you utilize it.
Oh, definitely. Well, not only that, but think about as we build, there's companies out there that are actually building smart buildings too, right?
Yes,
so you've got smart HVAC, you've got comings and goings of people, you're controlling all the cameras and all that stuff. Well, how does that all tie together, right? I mean, because I'll call them, loosely define them, workflows. Like a person pulls into a parking garage at 8 a.m., they scan into their building, they go about their workday. I mean, there's a series of events within the building, but then there's also these peripheral events outside of the building that you may want to track.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's not necessarily about Big Brother, right? It's not just about tracking people. It might be optimizing, workflow, traffic congestion based on when people are coming and going to a certain building, right? Think about a big headquarters. If you've got, Microsoft or Google or Amazon, and if you could get some telemetry on maybe some of the surrounding communal parking spaces or parking garages and better understand the logistics of how people are coming and going, you can actually optimize that.
I mean, a lot of it is about anticipating those needs.
Absolutely.
So, okay, if you're seeing that maybe there's an event in town that you hadn't anticipated, but you're seeing parking garages fill up, well, now all of a sudden you can automatically have signage in your city, direct people to open ones, rather than having this gridlock form.
Absolutely. People guessing or going to their favorite garage only to find out that they're literally, and I've done it. I've gone to the parking ramp at the airport maybe a minute or two later than I probably should have, only to find out that the ramp is full and you now have to go to the other airport. So I would love to be notified ahead of time or get an alert on my phone or something like that that says, hey Rick, you got to leave now because you got to go to the other ramp.
Right.
So definitely can see the need for that. And some of the things they go into in this particular series too, you're talking about, you've got this legacy stuff, some old, potentially SCADA networks or PCL or PLCs or a whole bunch of old types of things that have been implemented, have been around for a while now. You've got to incorporate them and integrate them into your existing.
Most cities, it's not feasible to completely reconstruct your infrastructure. You want to fit IoT into it.
Absolutely. And then of course you've got, security and trust. They're not the same, but they go hand in hand, right? Because security invokes trust, or lack of security invokes lack of trust, right? So I think you can talk about one without the other, but typically they go hand in hand in terms of basically extorting the benefits of the complementary capability.
Here with trust, they talk a lot about, in relation to the smarter cities, making sure that the public understands the purpose, that it's not Big Brother watching you. It's meant to be a benefit to anticipate your needs and make life easier for you.
Absolutely. Because we're all about smarter, not harder.
Yeah. So this series is really great, and they're definitely talking about smarter cities. But as we were mentioning earlier, it's really applicable to almost any IoT application. You always have to think about security. It's great if you think about the end user and keep them informed in the process as you make this IoT transition. And of course, like getting old tech to work with what you're doing now is a perpetual challenge for
absolutely.
people.
And in theory, you could overlay this on top of another domain. For example, the word city could be swapped out with, for example, a smarter airport or a smarter, and turn that city into almost like a microcosm of the bigger, broader city picture.
Absolutely.
You still have to deal with those fundamental issues like security, like trust, like interoperability, right? So yeah, definitely. Worthwhile taking a look at it, understanding the logistical challenges, understanding the design considerations, and as the series goes on, it'll be good to see how you address those, right? Because the first thing is identifying those challenges, and the second part, of course, is coming up with a strategy to address them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, great, I know what the problem is, but if I don't have a solution, then who cares?
Yeah.
So I digress. Next up, this one to me, and I always tease Mark, right? Mark's the data guy.
You can tease me, it's okay.
So Amanda's our data gal today, right? No, this is really cool, and normally, so we've had dynamic data masking for a while. And for those of you at home or might be listening via the podcast, dynamic data masking is?
It's de-identifying.
Sorry to put you on your spot.
No, that's okay. It's de-identifying your data, but basically on the fly. So it's as you do, let's say, a SQL query, it removes the known parts of the data. So if it's a social security number,
how you're querying the data, right? So it's contextual.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So it'll de-identify it as you move it out, if you are not necessarily allowed to view the actual identified data. And
so it's dynamic, obviously, but you can also custom the mask. You can customize the mask that you're presenting, right? So for example, if you've got a social security number, you can say, if the person's not allowed to see it, I want to see all zeros or maybe XXXXX, which potentially could violate if you're expecting a numeric value. It could break your unit test, right? Because you could do your assert is true, and all of a sudden there's alphanumeric characters. So you have to be careful with that, but it gives you that flexibility.
Absolutely,
right?
Yep.
So now static data masking is something entirely complementary.
It's absolutely complementary. And it's just like it sounds, it's static, so it's in place, and it's essentially a de-identified copy. You can't go back, so once you've de-identified it,
it's gone.
It's gone. You need to go back to your original copy to know what the actual identified data is. But I see this being really useful for people that want to, maybe not give their developers access to the production database, but still want to make it functional so that they can develop things that are useful.
Against a real data set. Well, I'll say quasi-real, right?
It's real enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It's real enough to build out the functionality that they want. It just doesn't have accurate data.
Right. I mean, but it might show you data in a way that trends towards a more realistic outcome, or evolve the data over time, as opposed to, and don't get me wrong, rick@katoso.com is awesome, but if I'm just truly randomizing and generating fake data, the likelihood of that data becoming pertinent over time, as I think about data analytics and as I think about reporting, your charts are just not going to represent reality, right? If I'm doing last mile analytics and against a data warehouse, it's really not going to be a good representation if I've mocked up all the data.
No, it's true. I mean, and a lot of times we go in and we try to do POCs with people, and it takes them forever to come up with a de-identified set.
Exactly.
And with this, you can do it a lot faster, and you can do it with a data set that's actually going to indicate any problems you might encounter, and it can make, say, a POC or a pilot a lot more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. The other cool thing about this, of course, is GDPR. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is a big component, it's a big challenge with GDPR. How do you take that data, de-identify it, but maybe troubleshoot, right? You may have a data set that you're trying to troubleshoot against, but you're running into issues with personally identifiable information. Your developers are now kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because they desperately want to help solve the problem, but at the same time, they really shouldn't be seeing the information that they have to look at, or a subset of it, right, to actually go and troubleshoot the problem. So from a GDPR perspective, you can take that production data set, apply static data masking to it, and now the developers have they have the ability essentially to replay or reproduce the actual problem with the actual subcomponents of the data without violating the GDPR restrictions that are in place.
Yeah.
Super cool. And the cool thing about this is you're not writing scripts, you're not coming up with this, elaborate set of tools to, choose this column, choose this column, choose this column. Here's the mask, here are the conditions, here's the criteria. It's all baked into the system, which is really super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people will find this a really effective tool that they're going to want to start using.
Yeah, and you can see over my shoulder, one of the cool things that you can do is you can actually obfuscate part of it. You can obfuscate the entire thing. So in this particular case, in the before and after scenarios, if you look over there, you can see the before data has got first name, last name. The after data doesn't have a first name. I mean, you can actually do that if you want to. The email addresses, you can see the domain stays the same, but the actual, I forget the term for it, but so the actual user, the identifiable part, thank you, has been obfuscated, so you can't see that anymore. Phone numbers can be just randomly generated if you want to do that. You could,
like in this example, they actually kept the area code. So if you want to do some queries on
geospatial,
where are my users coming from? What kind of phone numbers do they have? You have that area code information that's really pertinent to that kind of query, but you don't need to know their actual specific phone number.
Klondike 5, as they would say in The Simpsons. Yeah, so definitely, again, makes it that much easier, that much more powerful to be able to troubleshoot and diagnose and work through challenges that you're especially in a production scenario.
Absolutely.
So highly recommend, go take a look at it. I think it's in preview.
I believe so.
Yep, the public preview release. So it's the static data masking, and it helps you sanitize sensitive data in a copy and move forward with make progress in helping solve problems. So cool, very cool.
Go check it out.
Definitely. So last but definitely not least, Amanda and I were talking before the show started. I always get, in a nerdy kind of way, kind of excited when I come across these articles where people do these forensic analysis kind of situations, right? So in this particular case, we've got using Azure Security Center to detect when compromised Linux machines when animals attack, right?
Yeah,
it's like the Discovery Channel.
Yep.
So in this particular case, too, a lot of what we're seeing is, a lot of Linux exploits are done to create basically Bitcoin mining machines, right? We're seeing, I forget the statistics, but today, a large majority of the compromises happen when they're just dumping malicious code to run Bitcoin mining algorithms on that particular machine. Well, we kind of ignore the fact that there's all these other exploits. You're basically trying to do escalation of privileges. You're compromising that machine to create a botnet. You're doing a bunch of different things, not just Bitcoin mining, but there's all these other use cases where people are trying to compromise these machines.
Even just gaining access to a network.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Really simple things, but that can really cause a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
Down the line.
So it was kind of enlightening, though, to go through this article because, as you can see, what I discovered is we are actually, what you would expect, but it's never really been explicitly stated that we actually have honeypots. Right? We do actually deploy our own honeypots. So in the example that they show octets that are coming from Romania, and they're talking about where the traffic's coming from, where it's going to. So you can see the attacker in this particular case. You can see attacker IP address A and B. They're going to a customer VM, which is then going out to this honeypot because they think that it's a vulnerable machine or there's something that they can compromise or there's some kind of goodies. But the other components to this is they've identified locations on the public internet that are downloading these scripts from. So you almost look at it and go, well, part of me wonders, well, and so they're downloading scripts on the public internet, but they're also going into these forums asking for advice on how to modify these scripts. So sounds an awful lot like a script kiddie.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't necessarily sound like it's this hardcore Kevin Mitnick style, so a combination of social engineering with some really, really radical hacking techniques. It sounds like a script kiddie. But having said that, it doesn't matter. When your machine is compromised, your machine is compromised, right? Right. So it's just cool. They go through the article. They show, in fact, you can see the script looks. They actually show you some of the examples in the script where they're looking for specific information on that machine, right?
Real customer scenarios,
exactly.
Which is particularly interesting, I think, to know. Okay, these are what other customers went through, and these are the alerts they got. When they found. And the customer got an alert about going to that website, and it was a known website, so it was something that we had previously identified, and then they were able to track it from there to see, okay, how are they going to these forums?
Well, and when they replayed the breach, what they discovered was, I believe, if I remember correctly, it all started with somebody deploying, I think it was Cassandra with a default password.
Yeah, I know. So that's one of the recommendations at the end is don't use default passwords.
Okay, people, come on. We're past that, right? Aren't we past that, right? Didn't we learn our lesson with SQL Server 2000 and the blank password for the SA account?
I mean, but I see how it happens. People are deploying these huge systems. They're really complex. There's multi-steps to get them going. And it's not always a written out step to go change that default password. Or you don't know that there's a default password in place. And it's really easy to kind of have that overlooked. So I get it. Yes, I've been a victim of it too. But that's something just to sort of keep in the back of your mind when you're thinking about security, when you're deploying something. Is there a default password that I need to go change?
Yeah, absolutely. And arguably, I would say if you're building software, don't provide a default password. Make it
force an entry.
Force somebody to actually put something in there, right? I mean, we can do better. In fact, let's get away from passwords altogether at some point in our lives if we can find a better way to do that through multi-factor authentication or something else.
Amen.
But however, having said that, it was just really interesting to see. And then, of course, they talk about some of the different techniques, right? Like password sprays, right?
Yeah.
I've got a database of 35,000 different username and password combinations that I bought from the dark web. And now what I'm going to do is because I've compromised this machine and it's on a network of machines, I'm going to fan out and I'm going to just try and nail every one of these machines with these combinations of usernames and passwords, right? But what was interesting is apparently in this particular example, they started to perform something and then they stopped because I think they realized that it wasn't very effective what they were trying to do. And so they actually moved on to a different step, a different type of attack vector.
Okay.
And we watched it all. We were able to go through and see it all, take that information, basically productionize the alerts or the triggers that see that, and now roll that into Azure Security Center and give you yet another situation where you're protected either, well, I'll say near real time, if not real time. Once we start to see these patterns unfolding and emerging, we're going to notify you and say, hey, we see this going on. This is what we think is happening based on threat intelligence that we've gathered in the past. And oh, by the way, here's the remedy. Go change the default password on your Cassandra. But that's usually not the most important thing, right? The most important thing that they'll typically tell you is, especially if you're seeing attacker IP addresses from like Romania, the first thing they're going to tell you is go to your NSG and block that IP address. Block that range of IP addresses. Stop that. Once you've basically cut the access off, now we want you to go remediate all these other issues that you could be seeing in your infrastructure.
But I think that's so this was a really interesting read. It's nice to know how they set up these honeypots, how they track these people, how they can view what's happening, right? But I think the great moral of the story in this is that Microsoft's doing all of this on your behalf. You don't have to set up a security team to build their own honeypot, a security team, a red team, blue team. Right? You don't have to do that because we're giving you alerts and we're actually giving you the remedies in most cases to say, hey, this happened. Here's what you need to do to go take care of it and make sure it's not happening anymore.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, right? So knowing some of the attributes of the audience that we have for Azure Flash News, I would say, I don't even need to see people raise their hands if I said, raise your hand if you've got a red team and a blue team and you're constantly performing war games, right? Because the answer is nobody's raising their hand.
Pretty close to zero,
right? Yes. Well, and I can pretty comfortably say that almost, I mean, the number is less than 1. Yeah. if that can happen. But your point, these are things that we're doing on your behalf. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We are spending $1 billion with a B, dollars a year in research and development alone, just in R&D. I'm not talking about our operational systems. I'm not talking about the war games that we're doing. I'm just talking about just pure R&D, $1 billion on security.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that, though, is now you're seeing us escalate your security coverage and integration across all your digital properties within Microsoft. So you're not just relegated to Azure or just relegated to O365 or just Dynamics, right? What we've done is we've created visibility across your entire landscape, right? And so when you're seeing things like search, like when you're combining, your Bing search results maybe with some local stuff, like you see, for example, on our intranet, when I type in something, if I've got a shortcut, if there's a known shortcut, like HR Web is where we go for HR systems, right? It'll come up as, oh, did you mean to go to your internal HR website and here's a link to it, that kind of stuff, right? Well, with that comes a significant amount of security that you have to introduce to make sure that you don't have data bleed, that you don't have unauthenticated access to that information, right? All these things are happening behind the scenes. So we're really up in the security game, and we're doing it for you. Right? It's let me help you.
Yeah, that's what I like. This is interesting to read about, but ultimately, I don't know how to do any of it.
I know, right? It's not my gig.
I don't want to worry about it. I want to know that if I go out and I'm building something in Azure, the platform's secure, and Microsoft's watching my back, and they're going to alert me if there's problems.
They are, but again,
you still need to be aware of it.
Yes,
of course.
And one thing, of course, we always say on the show, it's a shared responsibility model, right? So we can provide all these, these hooks and all these policies and all these protection mechanisms. But if you're storing usernames and passwords in a TXT file that has and it's accessible via your website, all bets are off. I mean, you really just kind of left you got great locks on your front door, and you left a key in every single one of them.
Yep.
So don't do that. So having said that, we're coming up onto the top of the hour. Really, really appreciate everybody tuning in either live as we do the show, or of course, when you download via Stitcher or Google Play or iTunes. We always appreciate it. Feedback is always welcome. Amanda, if anybody has any questions, can they reach out to you by any chance?
Sure. Amanda.rosemark@microsoft.com.
What about Twitter handles?
I'm not really on Twitter, so.
Okay, just checking. Just wanted to make sure.
So contact me at Azure Flash News.
There you go. Perfect. And as usual, you can always get a hold of me at rick@microsoft.com, or quite easily at Azure Flash News, our Twitter handle. Don't forget to basically follow us on Twitter. You'll see a lot of these types of things break before we actually talk about them on the show. So really appreciate time, effort, and energy. And of course, thank you to the MTC. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes who's running the show for us, without a doubt. Emily, we can't do the show without you, so greatly appreciate that. And look forward to talking to you same time, same place next week. Until then, keep your fingers on the keyboard and your head in the clouds.